Hi, I'm Julia Wolfe, and I am a professor of music composition at the Steinhardt School at NYU. I am thrilled to be talking with Suzanne Bocanegra today. She has an incredible series of artist lectures, performance pieces that will be done at the Skirball Center coming up, and we're going to talk about those amazing pieces right now. So Suzanne Bocanegra, New York
I'm
artist.
Suzanne Bocanegra. I'm an artist and I live in New York. Actually, that's the first line of every single show that I've done. But it's always an actor who says the lines, not me. So, yeah.
Which is a really unique and beautiful, I've never seen that before. So just to explain to everyone else, Suzanne is in the piece, but, and I think sort of lightly lit. She is delivering the text to the ear of the actor, to the ear of the actor, and then that person is delivering the piece to the audience. So there's this kind of hidden artist behind the artist in that case, and it's just a very fascinating. How did you actually decide to do that?
That was because on my very first one that I did, which is When a Priest Marries a Witch with Paul Lazar, I was asked by Larry Cardish, who is he's a curator at the Museum of Modern Art and Film, and he asked me to do a lecture, just a slide lecture about my work. And I always wanted to tell the story about how I became an artist in my wacky Catholic church in Pasadena, Texas, and the scandal that happened when I was 8 years old. And after I finished writing it, I realized it was a story, and I wanted somebody who was really good at presenting stories to present it. And so I asked Paul, who's a friend, and I asked Paul, will you do this? And it was just going to be a one-off, and he goes, oh yeah, oh, fine, I'll do it. And that's how it happened. I just wanted it to be as good as I possibly could make it, and I wanted someone who could really convey all the humor and in the story, and I knew that I couldn't do that. I'm not an actor, it's not my skill, I mean, in the same way that, like, you write music, but you're not out there playing the violin, So it's somebody who is skilled at that, and skilled at connecting with an audience, presenting the story.
Well, the thing that's incredible is that it's like a happy accident. I mean, it was intentional in the sense you thought, I want this artist lecture to go well and to have this drama to it, but then it became like the form of your work, which is really remarkable. So all four pieces have you in it and the actor in it, telling how you became basically your journey as an artist, which is absolutely incredible. They're jam-packed. I mean, each piece is so much of a memoir. I don't know if you think of it that way, but very autobiographical.
Yeah, they all are very autobiographical. In fact, when I started, I thought I had 3 stories: what happened to my church, the body cast I wore when I was a teenager, and my grandparents' farm in LaGrange, Texas, a very small farm, kind of hard scrabble, and there's a very famous whorehouse that was across the street that became the best little whorehouse in Texas in the 80s, or maybe it's the 70s, I don't know. But it was a successful Broadway play and movie. So I thought, oh, these are the 3 stories that I have to tell. And there's something that's so interesting, I found, about rummaging around in your past and finding things and sort of looking at them and going, well, how did that work, and how did that shape me, and how much it informs what I do now, and all the things that don't, because you come across a lot of things you go, well, that was just a side road and never went anywhere. But and then the 4th one, though, it didn't start from a personal story. It was a commission from the Met to do one of these about a piece of art that they owned. And so I chose the tapestry. It's a 16th century tapestry. It has 69 characters in it, and they're all labeled. Because I thought, if I can't think of anything to say, I can just say who each one of these people. I mean, if you spent 1 minute on each person, that's already an hour, and 9 minutes. So, but that's not what I did. But still, I thought, I'm safe with this tapestry. But yeah, the first 3 were personal stories, and the last one started somewhere else.
So it's interesting it started somewhere else because in each, and we should maybe probably say the names, of each piece. I don't know,
It's When a Priest Marries a Witch, Body Cast, Farmhouse Whorehouse, and Honor.
and now that you've mentioned Honor, even though that began from an outside source, there's such a strong tie through all the pieces, and with Honor as well, of your personal response to art. So through all these pieces, you're looking at these kind of famous, iconic, magnificent works of art juxtaposed next to popular culture and your own personal history in the town you grew up in. So there's this kind of, people want to say high art, low art, but it's so like seamlessly interwoven. I mean, I don't know if that's part of the message that you're trying to tell, but there's this kind of seamless weave between what you might see at the Met, like a great piece of art that everyone reveres, and a kind of cheesy movie about like a nun singing or something, So, how did you think about that in terms of weaving the famous art with the popular art?
I didn't start out thinking that's what I was going to do. It just comes out, if you start thinking about something. Actually, When a Priest Marries a Witch, it's about my church and this scandal that happened with an artist. And then it became more layered because I realized it happened in the 60s. And I realized a lot of the stuff that I was talking about, like my kids wouldn't know what the heck. Things like how radical it was to have long hair. They would go, well, who cares? And also what we considered long hair was like this, not a crew cut, right? And so I realized, and also things about the Catholic Church, I realized there were things that I had to explain to make the story make sense. And so that's how I started looking at other things and other ways to explain why what happened was such a scandal and what was going on in the 60s in Pasadena, Texas. And which was a very working class kind of neighborhood, and then I also realized I had to talk about the history of the Catholic Church, and so it just, more and more things came into the story, and then I found out that every story you tell, it kind of can go in so many different directions. The hard thing is like editing out what you don't need, because you can deep dive into anything and find all kinds of interesting things, but if you want to keep the story flowing, you can't put them all in there. So a lot of what I do is I gather up tons and tons and tons of stuff, personal and things that I read about, and then just like start taking it all out, and so yeah, that's.
Well, it's interesting because I remember when you first started to do these pieces, I was like, oh, Suzanne's doing theater now, like that's so interesting. Now looking back at the whole set of pieces, which are remarkable for artist lectures, I can see, and this is maybe like looking back, but I can see the threads. You started as a visual artist. You began as a child, like with this fascination with coloring and just everything visual, everything from coloring to fashion, to honor badges and your Girl Scout troop, and then moving into creating visual art. You're a painter and you draw and a sculptor, and so. This transition, it seems like you mentioned it happened accidentally, but does it feel, was it like a shock? Oh my gosh, now I'm on stage. To suddenly do live art with live elements?
Well, it was actually about the same time that we built a theater in our house, and
where we are now.
Yeah, we're actually in one of the benches, but it kind of like it, not knowing what the heck I was going to do with this theater, and but it just popped into my head. Oh, it started because my studio was here, my artist studio, and then I moved it out to Brooklyn, and there was this extra space, and so we decided capriciously, with no real idea in mind just to build a theater and see what would happen. And so I learned so much about theater just from that and seeing other people perform and all that kind of stuff. So kind of these things were all coming together. But I mean, I still do painting and drawing. Right now my next performance artist lecture is going to be on costume, but I decided to start it by drawing it first. So I've been going to my studio and drawing it. I have probably a couple hundred drawings at this point. I don't know if how that's going to work into it, but I thought, well, it'd be interesting to start from a different point and see what that would lead me to. And then I did a museum show at the Fabric Workshop in Philadelphia, and that was taking things that I learned in theater and then interpreting them for like a museum setting. So one piece was my version of Valley of the Dolls, one piece, the movie, not the book, and one was a staging of La Fille Malgarde, which is an early 17th century ballet, and then the opera dialogue of the Carmelites. So I was thinking about how theater operates and how I could take those elements and rejigger them and interpret that for a gallery setting. And so it's kind of been going back and forth a lot, which is really fun.
And it seems like so much of the work is still somehow in the context of a museum, it's at the Met, or in a gallery setting. Moving into the Miller Theater, I'm sorry, Miller, that was a mistake. Moving
Skirball.
into Skirball,
Yeah.
moving into Skirball, you know that presence of the history of visual art isn't around you. So suddenly you're bringing it into. I mean, Skirball has a huge wide range of the kinds of presentation they do: dance, theater, music, but what you're doing is really unique. So suddenly you're moving it. Is this the first time it's existed in a non-art space?
No, because a couple of them started at band, so that's a theater, and a lecture is a performance. It's just people don't think of it that way, but they just get up and present their information. But it actually is a performance. There's always a performer. There is a set, whether you acknowledge it or not, and there is a script, and so. It's just I took all those things and took them really seriously, and then took the elements of theater, which is lighting design and having a director. I learned what a director was, and it's like it makes a huge difference. An actor. I used all these tricks of the trade in theater, things that have been developed for hundreds of years in order to engage an audience, and I've just taken those things and applied it to a lecture, and those things can really work.
Oh yeah.
Lighting design, all that stuff. It's like incredible.
I think we should bring that into the NYU classroom. Like, I mean, because one of the fascinating things is, I mean, for me, I'm not a super tutor person in the history of art. It's really educational. So I'm going on, oh, Suzanne's showing me Bruegel. Oh, Suzanne is showing me the history of tapestry. Again, mixed in with these very personal elements. But for an untutored audience, which you might get to a certain degree at Skirball, it's like a journey into how to think about art or what goes into a piece of art. Everything from the gore and the bloody histories to the irony to whatever the artist is trying to communicate. But it's I don't know if you think of it as educational, because that seems so dry, because it's so not dry. But there's a certain way that you're taking our hand and leading us.
Well, history is just storytelling, and some of that stuff is so crazy. You just feel like you can't make it up. I mean, it's just you go, what? As you're reading different things, you're just going, oh, no. But yes, they did do that, and so it's just fascinating, and it's hard to decide what to keep in and what to edit out, because history is bizarre, if you start really combing through it, and I'm not even a historian, so I don't even know how deep a lot of these things go. I'm just skimming the surface, but.
Although it feels like it's art history, like again, well, art history is history, you know, and it can't be separated from what's going on at the time, and clearly it's reflecting what was going on in the time when you're talking about various works of art. But it's, it seems very natural, like it doesn't seem like, I'm not trying to be a historian, it seems so natural. I mean, you're just looking at how you thought about art, we're getting your thinking about looking at a piece of art, you know, in ways that I would never think of, you know. I mean, just like even when you're looking at Bruegel, like the pieces where you're painting all of the colors of the petals and the very abundant flower paintings that Bruegel did. It's your eye that's taking us sort of back and looking at how did these pieces come into. So it's a kind of like Suzanne Bocanegra art history, for me at least. You know, it's a great.
Well, there's so much great art, you know, and it's really fun to look at it. You know, it's funny because I went to University of Texas and I was an art major, and they required at that time. I hope they still do, but maybe they don't. They required you to be a art history minor, so you had to take a lot of art history, and I hated it. I just hated it until I got this really great professor. He's deceased now. His name was Richard Bertel, and I took a course he had on the city of Paris, and he talked about 19th century Paris and everything that happened, including the boulevards being built and how that affected people and impressionist art, all that kind of stuff. He talked about all of it, and it was fascinating. And I kept taking his courses, even if it was a subject I didn't think I was interested in, because I realized that someone who looked at the world like he looked at it could make it interesting, even if it wasn't a subject that you thought you were interested in. And then I'm forever grateful that they made me keep taking art history, because then after, you know, sleeping through a lot of terrible classes, you know, you finally get something that's really good, and that stuff has always stuck with me. And so I think that's kind of what goes through my mind when I'm putting these lectures together too. So
No, that's really beautiful. I mean, amazing the power of one brilliant teacher. That sounds like it's so much in your work, you know, coming from it from a sociological, political, you know, psychological, historical perspective. It's just, that's how we should think about art. And it's interesting even for like younger students today, you know, this kind of reminder, you know, there was some stuff that came before you, you know, you didn't invent the wheel, you know, and it's great they're really inventing, they are inventing things that are just to do with today, but the fact that in your work, you're hearkening back to the roots of your own thinking, and I think that's incredible part of the work. So I was also thinking about, are there connections before, like pre-artist lecture, and I was seeing some connections in terms of the kind of aesthetics, you know, the beautiful pieces you made that are more like, forgive me if it's the wrong term, but sort of more collage, diagram-like works, sculptural works. I somehow, and looking at these pieces, and which everyone here will really flip out over if you can come to see them, the artist lectures, there is this sort of hard Scrabble element that I kept connecting back to your grandparents' farm, you know.
that's the aesthetic I loved. I learned that aesthetic from them. I mean, they weren't trying to teach me an aesthetic, that was just their life. But I loved that stuff. I mean, I loved we went there once a month, and I would spend the summer there. And so that kind of, I remember, you know, just looking at all these big cow patties that were all over the property, you know, and how they look like these big abstract paintings, you know, although I didn't think about it as abstract painting at the time. But, you know, I got a lot of my love of that kind of roughness, I think, from hanging out with them.
Well, it's interesting also how you describe it, because in a certain sense, okay, so there are your grandparents, then there's your mom, and then there's you, so you're like a couple generations removed from it, and you had this almost idealization or euphoric response to this wonderful time with your grandparents, and your mom was like, I'm out of here. You know,
Not just my mom, her siblings too. They left as soon as possible because it's like, for her it was a hard life and it was boring and you know, you couldn't, there was no such thing as vacation because that, you know, you can't leave the cows or you can't leave your crops and they just didn't, and it was boring because it was just your family and then you would hire people. I didn't see this because by the time I came around, they still had crops and they still had a couple of cows and stuff, but they weren't nearly as active as they used to be, but they would hire people at harvest time, you know, but just temporary and what my mom liked and what her siblings liked was talking to, you know, meeting people in the office and having next door neighbors and not having to get dirty and doing interesting, or even if it was boring work, for my mom it was more interesting than working, you know, picking corn or picking cotton or whatever they were doing. So, or milking a cow, you know, all that stuff, she just hated it, you know, and I never had to do it. So of course I could idolize it, yeah.
Well, that's what was so interesting too, with you going back and looking at people like, you know, forming these utopian colonies, like the Nearings, or, you know, and having this very real world perspective on, well, actually, I know what this is, I know where this came from, and then examining these other kinds of movements that you wind up discussing in your pieces. But one of the interesting things is that I don't know, maybe one of the threads is that they were always doing everything, making things, you know, so they would be, like your mom, for example, was always sewing your clothes, and your grandmother, I remember you saying something like, well, in one of the pieces, well, why would you go buy it? You can make it, you know, with everything.
They were practical. It was about saving money, you know, and they were really practical. Yeah.
And self-reliant.
Yeah.
Yeah, and here you are, like, making things. So do you think there's a...
Yeah, but I'm not making my clothes and all that stuff. I mean, I'm making stuff that are, you know, I don't know.
It's different. I guess because I don't make anything tactile, you know, I'm looking at you and go, oh, I see where it comes from. Like, they got their hands in with material and made it for them, right? It was a
Well, I do think that my mom was such a big sewer, and I had a new outfit every week, and so she went well beyond what we needed, and I think she liked doing it. But I remember going to the fabric stores with her. That was so amazing. It's better than a museum just to see all these colors and patterns, and they're just cheek by jowl, going through the aisles, feeling them. I mean, it's a very visual and sensual experience, and we went all the time. So, and flipping through these big catalogs that were all the patterns, just sitting on a stool and just flipping. And then you have to imagine, like, you know, there was always a special dress, like for your birthday or Christmas or something, so then you'd have to imagine what pattern and what fabric. And then you'd have to imagine, of that pattern, do you want the short sleeves? I mean, there's a lot of, like, you have to conceptualize it and visualize it in your head before you actually make it. So,
so it was sort of training your mind. I mean,
you have to think
I don't remember doing anything like that. So, but that you had to kind of break it down
and also, a lot of times it doesn't work. That's the other interesting thing. Like, we spend so much time figuring all that out, and then it just doesn't look good on you. You know, and
that would be okay.
No, you wouldn't wear it.
You wear it.
or you barely wear it. Or sometimes Mom would go, I spent a lot of time on that, and you've never worn it. It's like, it's like, it doesn't look that right, you know. But you'd wear it anyway but you know, and sometimes she'd even acknowledge it doesn't look good because it's like you don't know. You can't try it on beforehand.
Right.
But anyway, yeah, there was a lot of making going on.
Amazing. I think what else we want to cover.
How long have we been going for?
Yeah,
it seems like we've been going for a long time.
3:17.
So 3:17.
Maybe one or two more.
Is there anything else that you want to cover, Suzanne, that we should make sure we get in there?
Oh well, all these actors are really amazing. Like Lily Taylor, Paul Lazar, Ruth Naga, who this is my first time to work with Ruth, but she's a movie star, but she's also really an incredible stage actor. And to me, it's been such an education to see what actors can do. They really, and they take the temperature of the audience. Before I got into this world, I always thought as being a member of the audience, I was invisible. Oh no, you are not. They see you, and they're even if it doesn't look like they see you, and they read the audience, and because you're who they're trying to come across to. It's just so fascinating to me, and just to see how they know how to turn a phrase and make it sad or make it happy. You know, you can just tell them, and they'll just do that, and. I don't know, that whole thing has been so fascinating to me.
So this process of developing the piece is first you hunting and gathering, refining, editing, delivering it to them, and then there's this whole other collaborative time period.
Well, what's happened so far is I get it all together and then we workshop it. So the actor, the director, the technical director, Joey, we all get together and we just go through the script and hear where it lands and where it doesn't land. And sometimes I read it, sometimes the actor reads it, just to find out what works and what doesn't work. And now, like, I've worked with Lily a lot, so she actually, adds things too that make it more interesting. And or she'll say, for example, this is something that was really good. We were doing the tapestry one, and we didn't have a chance to workshop it that much because of COVID. But so on our first workshop, she said, "But I still don't know what a tapestry is." And I thought, well, see that sentence there, I told you. And she's like, well, it didn't come across. And so I had to figure out how to make that come across. But she can hear it. And because she has to say it, so
Right.
That's been so interesting to me to get kind of all these. You kind of put it all together, but then you get all these other cooks in the room, and they sort of help you finish it
It's
off.
like a mirror back to, I guess.
Yeah.
I really appreciate it because I am a person who would need my hand held through it. And I think that's probably true from the average audience. Obviously, it's an educated audience. We're here at NYU. The crowd is probably has a certain knowledge base about theater and about art, but I had no idea that the whole history. I mean, I looked at tapestries. Do I know where they came from or how they're set up or all the meaning behind
I didn't
them?
know either.
Nothing. So that you actually kind of, in a very beautiful way, hold our hand through it as we watch your perception of understanding what this art was. Absolutely fascinating. And it's really going to be a treat. Everyone has to go see these pieces. And I also just want to say, I think that it's a really unique moment. Like what Suzanne is doing is a really unique shift in performance that we haven't seen before. And that doesn't happen that often. Okay, we know what visual art is. I know what sculpture is. And, there's a lot of blurring of lines. But when you're actually kind of crossing, and sort of the moment performance art sort of came into consciousness, these pieces are not exactly like performance art, but it's this kind of breaking of the boundaries. And it's happening right now,
Yeah.
Yay!
Yeah.
Is that good?
Yeah, I guess that's good.
That was my little comment.
Yeah, you wrapped it all up. You wrapped it all up.
You can
Yeah,
cut
that's
that if
great.
you don't.